All right, team, welcome to another episode of the Exceptional Leadership Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Matt Hamilton. Delighted to have your company with me from wherever you may be listening from. And today's topic is a beauty. It is positive disruption. And it's close to my heart because I think it is something that sets leaders apart from one another. The ability to recognize when change needs to be implemented without asking for permission first. And the permission piece is a big part of this because I'm sure we've all been in positions where you have been thwarted by those around you and your superiors from making a change that really needs to be made. And it's not been all that clear as to why. In fact, it might seem that their decision to refuse that change is driven by fear rather than logic. And for that reason, it can be very, very frustrating. So if you've done your critical thinking piece and you think that the reward outweighs the risk, sometimes being positively disruptive can be enormously beneficial for the organization. And it can also be a demonstration of truly exceptional leadership. But we'll get into that a little bit more after we paint the picture from a historical context to illustrate the point. And to do that today, we're going to go all the way back to the late 1960s and have a look at the story of a gentleman called Herb Kelleher and the disruption that made flying affordable in the United States. Here we go. In the late 1960s, the US airline industry was anything but accessible. It was tightly regulated by the Civil Aeronautics Board. Ticket prices were fixed, and only a few major airlines dominated the market with high fares, rigid schedules, and unnecessary frills. Flying was a luxury, and the rules were built to keep it that way. That's when Herb Kelleher, a chain-smoking, bourbon-drinking Texas lawyer, decided to challenge the entire system. And to do that, he co-founded Southwest Airlines with a simple but revolutionary idea to offer fast, reliable, low-cost flights between major cities in Texas, Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio. No hub-and-spoke nonsense, no meal trays, no class divide, just easy travel. Kelleher and his team didn't ask for permission to rewrite the playbook. They launched Southwest as an intrastate airline, cleverly avoiding federal regulations by operating only within Texas. But despite this, the established airlines didn't take it lying down. Competitors like Braniff and Texas International filed lawsuits to stop Southwest from even taking off. Kelleher, undeterred, fought back in court and at one point personally argued a case before the Texas Supreme Court, where he won. Once in the air, Kelleher continued to disrupt. He refused to follow industry norms, and here's a few examples of the way that he did that. Firstly, he insisted on only having one type of aircraft. That was the Boeing 737, a decision made to simplify maintenance and training. There were no assigned seats, which sped up boarding and cut turnaround time down to 10 minutes. Thirdly, there was no first class, which meant that everybody paid fair and affordable prices. And finally, there was no meal service, but instead a sense of humour, with famously quirky flight attendants and a relaxed service setting. When rising fuel prices and fleet costs threatened the business in its early days, Kelleher authorised the sale of one of the airline's 4 planes. Instead of reducing routes, he told crews to work faster and more efficiently, creating the now famous 10-minute turnaround. And it worked. Despite fierce resistance, Southwest slowly grew into one of the most consistently profitable airlines in history. Even as its competitors floundered through bankruptcies and bailouts, Kelleher's refusal to follow industry norms reshaped not only his company, but the entire air travel experience for Americans. And that's an interesting little excerpt that I think illustrates the point quite nicely. And it is that people don't like change. Even if it's positive, sometimes they struggle to conceive of that. And sometimes they need to be shown a new way. And often, I've found that if there's no obvious precedent for something, people will say it can't be done or it's too hard. And I'm sure you've experienced that too. And these characteristics extend to many leaders as well. It's not just our teams and our followers and colleagues. It is people in prominent places all around the world. And you'll find them across multiple organizations and sectors, whether it's the corporate world or the political world. People are very, very reluctant sometimes to make meaningful change. And oftentimes that's driven from a place of risk mitigation. So we need courage to implement meaningful change. And that's one of the reasons I think that it sets great leaders apart from run-of-the-mill leaders. The courage and the vision to do so. You know, I think exceptional leaders are visionaries. And we don't let the fear of change stop us from implementing it if it is the right thing to do. And when I say the right thing to do, I mean the right thing to do for the growth of success and prosperity, the benefit to people in the organization, overall organizational health. That is what good looks like. Now, why is that? Why are good leaders, why are great leaders able to be visionary and not let the fear of change stop them from implementing change like so many others? It's because exceptional leaders are able to think outside the box and understand three key things. Here's three key elements that I think enable you to pull the trigger and disrupt in a really positive fashion. The first one is the understanding that the human mind will usually default to a no answer when faced with a significant change proposal, because we are risk adverse as a species. If it's all working now, why would we change? You know, yeah, sure there's problems, sure there's inefficiencies, but you know what? What we've got now is pretty good. Better the devil you know than the one you don't. There's entire political parties founded around this idea of being conservative and keeping the status quo and not changing too much. And there is validity to that. I'm not knocking that idea. We do need to weigh up the pros and cons of change. Sometimes we need to understand that what we have is good. But we also need to make sure that it doesn't stifle growth and progression if it means we're in a better spot on the other side. Let's get back to our list. Point number 2. As exceptional leaders, we know that we need to show people the way, as words only do so much, i.e., we don't ask for permission. Now, there's a caveat to that, which we'll explore in a few moments. And point number 3 is that we know how to think critically through our plans before we implement anything, therefore limiting the downside so that, yes, we're taking a chance, but by the time we pull the trigger, it's been de-risked due to our critical analysis. And for further context on that, revisit episode number 38, Critical Thinking. Absolutely vital part of this discussion, the cornerstone. So we know that people usually want things to stay the same, and we know that we need to show them. And we've done our risk analysis, which says there's sufficient upside and that we can contain the risk. So that equals positive disruption, which translates to visionary leadership that is often praised when you deal with the doubters and the naysayers and you get to the other side and everything's worked out and you get the accolades. But the caveat to that is that proceeding with a change piece on a hunch, especially with big change, predominantly big change I'm talking about here, proceeding just on a hunch without any critical thinking or analysis is absolutely foolish and poor leadership. Do your homework. When I say be disruptive in a positive fashion, I do not mean make changes all over the place without thinking them through. Because understand that as a leader, it is a responsibility that rests on your shoulders. If the change works, it rests on your shoulders. If the change falls in a heap, it rests on your shoulders. You take responsibility regardless of the outcome. So make sure you do that point 3, the critical thinking piece, before deciding to pull the trigger. You own the outcome. And also vital to understand is that we have to be wise with respect to the change pieces that we want to implement, i.e. pick your battles. Because people can only handle so much change, even if it's positive. There's a fatiguing element to always having this air of instability in your environment. We like predictability as humans. It signals safety. Change, even if good, takes a toll. So proceed with caution. And the elephant in the room here that I want to cover is a cautionary note. As a part of that critical thinking, analysis and planning, you have to have a thorough understanding of the consequences for proceeding without permission. And I would suggest that if you don't fully understand those consequences and you haven't worked them through, hold off until you have achieved an understanding. This is why it's a delicate balance, a fine line to walk. Because it's quite possible that some change initiatives, if you were to implement them without the permission required from the appropriate people, could actually work out really badly for you. So make sure that there are not going to be any significant consequences for implementing a change off your own bat without permission. We need to lead wisely. So understand that as a part of your critical analysis, that is a crucial piece to understand. But it is something that if you can strike the balance with, people will really look up to you as a leader, because you will be seen as someone who cuts through bureaucracy and isn't afraid to lead with courage. And that is really inspiring to look up to for a follower. And I'm going to leave you with a quote from a fantastic book, The 48 Laws of Power, just to put a ribbon on this. It's Law 45, preach the need for change, but never reform too much at once. And there's a little excerpt from this book that I think is well worth considering. Everyone understands the need for change in the abstract. But on the day-to-day level, people are creatures of habit. Too much innovation is traumatic and will lead to revolt. If you are new to a position of power or an outsider trying to build a power base, make a show of respecting the old way of doing things. If change is necessary, make it feel like a gentle improvement on the past. Emphasis on the word gentle. So proceed with caution, but if you can find this balance, it can be well worth executing a change without permission and being positively disruptive. Guys, I hope that resonates with you. I'm sure you can think of many situations where that is applicable to you in your organizations. I'm sure you can think off the top of your head without too much effort, changes that need to be made, but maybe some harder thinking is required with respect to whether you are in a position to implement those changes, and then secondly, whether there would be any consequences for you implementing those changes without seeking approval first. It takes courage, it takes skill, and it takes a lot of wisdom. So tread very carefully, but if you can get it right, it can be truly inspirational. Guys, follow the show on Instagram, follow us on Facebook, all the socials, and of course, make sure that if you're listening to this show, you are subscribed on whatever podcast platform you consume us on. And if you're feeling really generous, leave us a 5-star review. Guys, these really do help. People often go to the review section to get that social validation. When they see a lot of positive 5-star reviews, it lets them know that the show is worth checking out. So if it's something that you get value from, it would really help the show out tremendously if you would leave a really nice 5-star review. That would be very much appreciated, team. But that's enough from me. Thank you once again for joining me. Until the next one, I'll see you later.